The pounding on my door at 7 a.m. made the windows rattle. Two men in black HOA jackets stood on my porch, violation folders in hand, smirks on their faces. They'd come to threaten a 68-year-old veteran with foreclosure. What they didn't know, my son, a Delta Force operator with 3 combat tours, had just returned home the moment my son, 6 feet 3 inches in frame, filled the doorway, his green tank top revealing arms hardened by combat training. Those HOA bullies suddenly forgot their rehearsed threats. How quickly power shifts when intimidation meets someone who can't be intimidated. My name is James Mercer. For nearly 2 decades I've lived in Whispering Pines, a planned community of brick colonials and meticulous landscaping. I taught American history at Lincoln High for 34 years. Before retiring, my late wife Eleanor and I bought this house in 2007, planning to grow old together surrounded by the garden she lovingly cultivated. Eleanor passed 5 years ago, congestive heart failure. After the funeral, I planted an oak sapling over a portion of her ashes, just beyond our back patio where morning light filters through the branches. It was her favorite spot to read. Our neighborhood had always been peaceful, a mix of retirees and young families. The HOA existed mainly to maintain the community pool and organize the annual 4th of July picnic. Monthly dues were reasonable at $75. Board elections happened without drama or controversy. Everything changed 18 months ago when Victoria Blackwell moved into the sprawling colonial at the neighborhood entrance. Within 3 months, she'd maneuvered her way onto the HOA board. Within 6, she was president. The transformation was immediate and jarring. Our sleepy community organization became something unrecognizable. Monthly dues increased to $175. The board meetings, once casual affairs with coffee and cookies, turned into formal proceedings governed by obscure parliamentary procedures that silenced dissent. New rules appeared weekly. Mailbox heights had to be exactly 41 in no more no less. Holiday decorations could only be displayed for 12 days and required prior approval. Even grass height became strictly regulated between 2.5 and 3.5 and measured weekly. The enforcement mechanisms changed too. Victoria hired Richard Kowalski, a former police officer who'd left the force under murky circumstances, as community compliance director. He patrolled in a white SUV with HOA security emblazoned on the doors, photographing violations and delivering notices. First, I kept my head down. After Eleanor's death, I didn't have the energy for confrontation. I adjusted my mailbox height. I measured my grass. I removed Christmas lights precisely 12 days after putting them up. But then came the community participation mandate, a new bylaw requiring all homeowners to serve at least 10 hours monthly on HOA committees. Those who refused would face escalating fines culminating in property liens. I attended the next board meeting to question the legality of forced participation. Victoria recognized me with visible reluctance. With all due respect, I said, this new requirement seems legally dubious. You can't compel labor as a condition of home ownership. Victoria's smile never reached her eyes. Mr. Mercer, these are voluntary committees. No one is forcing participation. There's simply a non-participation fee structure for those who choose not to volunteer. A non-participation fee of $500 monthly isn't voluntary. I countered. It's coercion. The room tensed. No one had challenged Victoria so directly before. Mr. Mercer, she responded icily, perhaps retirement has left you unfamiliar with modern community governance standards. The board's decision is final. Next item. That night, I drafted a letter to the State Housing Authority questioning the legality of the mandate. I shared copies with neighbors, collecting 16 signatures supporting the inquiry. 3 days later, the first violation notice appeared on my door. The violations multiplied with alarming speed. My oak tree, now 5 years old and flourishing, was suddenly an unapproved species. The American flag that had draped my brother's casket after Vietnam was improperly displayed. Eleanor's rose garden was cited for exceeding ornamental plant limitations. Each violation carried increasingly punitive fines. Within weeks, I'd accumulated over $4,000 in penalties. When I attempted to appeal at the monthly board meeting, Victoria refused to recognize me. The isolation tactics were subtle but effective. Invitations to neighborhood functions stopped arriving. Former friends would wave, but not stop to chat. My weekly poker game disbanded without explanation. Only Marie Delaney, a 79-year-old widow who'd lived across the street for 23 years, remained openly friendly. She'd bring over banana bread and share neighborhood gossip. They're targeting others too, she confided one afternoon. Anyone who signed your letter The Patels were fined for cooking odors. The Johnsons' basketball hoop was removed without notice. It's like living under a microscope, but the harassment escalated beyond mere fines. My mail began arriving. My trash wasn't collected for 2 consecutive weeks. Routing error. According to the company, one morning I found my garden hose cut into pieces. Most disturbing was the anonymous call to Adult Protective Services claiming I was suffering from dementia and couldn't care for myself. A social worker arrived unannounced, apologetic, but obligated to investigate. By month 3, the fines had grown to $14,750, nearly my entire yearly pension. The certified letter that arrived on Tuesday made their endgame clear: pay in full within 10 days or face lien proceedings followed by foreclosure. That evening I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by violation notices, calculating how quickly I could liquidate my modest savings and whether it would be enough. The sound of tires on the gravel driveway interrupted my grim arithmetic. Through the window I spotted a mud-spattered pickup truck. A tall figure emerged, duffel bags slung over one shoulder, a military rucksack over the other. My son Michael had come home from his deployment 2 weeks early. At 38, he'd spent 17 years in Special Forces, the last 8 with Delta Force, conducting counterterrorism operations. The boyish face I remembered had been replaced by something harder, weathered by desert sun and night operations in hostile territory. His physique had transformed. 2 years of military training had sculpted him into an imposing figure of solid muscle. That night, as we sat on the back deck watching fireflies rise from the lawn, I tried to downplay the HOA situation, but the stack of violation notices on the kitchen table told their own story. Michael read each one methodically, his expression unreadable. Then he arranged them chronologically, creating a visual timeline of escalation. "This isn't random harassment," he said quietly. "This is systematic, targeted pressure with a specific goal." He pointed to the pattern. "They're building a paper trail to justify taking your home. The question is why?" He spent the next morning reviewing our HOA covenant line by line, finding multiple discrepancies between the original document and Victoria's updated interpretation. By afternoon, he drafted a point-by-point rebuttal of each violation, citing specific covenant language that contradicted the notices. "First rule of counterinsurgency," he explained with grim humor, "know the terrain better than your enemy." The pounding on our front door came at precisely 7 a.m. Wednesday. Michael was already awake. Years of military routine had programmed his body to rise before dawn. He'd completed a 5 m run and had just changed into his green tank top and olive green cargo pants, his typical casual attire that reflected his military background. When the banging started through the peephole, I saw Victor Simmons, the HOA treasurer, and Richard Kowalski, their compliance director. Both wore matching black jackets with HOA emblazoned across the back in large white letters, looking like security personnel rather than neighborhood representatives. "I'll get it," Michael said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Stay here." I watched from the hallway as my son, 6 feet 3 inches in of honed muscle, dressed in his green tank top and olive green cargo pants, opened the door wide, his powerful frame filling the entire doorway. I could see the back of the 2 HOA officers as they faced my son, their confident postures visibly faltering at the sight of the imposing figure now standing before them. "Gentlemen," Michael said, his voice deceptively soft, "how can I help you?" Victor recovered. "First, we're here for James Mercer regarding critical violations that require immediate," "and you are," Michael interrupted, making no move to invite them in. "Victor Simmons, HOA treasurer. This is Richard Kowalski, community compliance. We need to speak with James Mercer immediately about urgent financial matters." "What matters specifically?" Michael asked. Richard, clearly hired for intimidation, stepped forward. "This is official HOA business. We need to speak to the homeowner now. I am family." Michael replied, "Anything concerning my father can be addressed to me." The standoff lasted several uncomfortable seconds. "Fine," Victor snapped, extending a folder. "Your father has accumulated $14,750 in violations. Payment is due in full within 10 days, or we'll begin foreclosure proceedings." Michael took the folder, but didn't open it. "That's an impressive sum for grass height and an oak tree." Victor's face reaned. "There are 17 distinct violations documented, with photographs taken while trespassing on private property." Michael finished. "Several after dark, based on the timestamps." Richard stepped forward aggressively. "Listen, we don't know who you think you are, but this situation doesn't concern you. Your father signed a covenant agreeing to." Michael's posture shifted. Almost imperceptibly, nothing overtly threatening, just a minimal adjustment of weight and balance, but something in that subtle movement made Richard stop mid-sentence. "Actually," Michael said, his voice still conversational, "I've spent the morning reviewing that covenant. Fascinating document. Did you know Section 5 Paragraph 3 explicitly prohibits the board from imposing cumulative fines exceeding $500 without a full membership vote?" Victor blinked rapidly. "The board has enforcement discretion within the boundaries established by the covenant." Michael agreed, "which also guarantees homeowners the right to appeal any violation directly to an independent mediator." "Has my father been offered that opportunity?" The men exchanged glances. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside," Michael suggested, stepping back from the doorway. "I've just made coffee." The trap was so elegantly constructed that they walked right into it in our kitchen. Michael invited them to sit, then methodically dismantled each violation while recording the entire conversation on his phone with surgical efficiency. Michael dismantled their case. "This oak tree approved with Victoria's own signature 5 years ago." He produced the dated document. "These rose bushes explicitly recommended in your own guidelines." The evidence materialized with each accusation as 17 violations crumbled into dust. Victor's face flushed crimson, while Richard's confident posture collapsed into stunned silence. The methodical takedown revealed not random enforcement, but calculated persecution. "Gentlemen," Michael concluded, after 40 minutes, "this pattern suggests targeted harassment rather than legitimate enforcement. I've documented everything, including your admissions that proper procedures weren't followed. The next step would typically involve attorneys, but I believe in giving people one chance to do the right thing." He slid the folder back across the table. "All violations rescinded by close of business today, all fines waived, and my father receives written confirmation otherwise. My next calls will be to the State Attorney General's office, the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, and several media contacts who find stories about elderly harassment particularly compelling." They left quickly, violation notices abandoned on my kitchen table. "That won't be the end of it," Michael said as their SUV screeched away, the passenger door still swinging open. His eyes the same calculating gaze I'd seen in news footage of Spec Ops veterans. "Narrowed men like that retreat only to regroup. They've invested too much to walk away." He checked his watch. "We have maybe 36 hours before they come back with something worse. Time to find out what we're really fighting." Michael deployed his military intelligence training with surgical precision, bypassing confrontation. He silently mapped the HOA power structure while uncovering a damning pattern through public records. Victoria's husband, Lawrence, CEO of Meridian Development Group, had executed identical takeovers in neighboring communities, infiltrating HOAs, manipulating zoning laws, and transforming family neighborhoods into lucrative high-density developments. More concerning were the property records showing that 14 homes in our neighborhood had been purchased in the past year by different LLCs, all sharing the same registered agent as Meridian Development. "They're buying up the neighborhood," I realized, "but why target specific properties, and why the sudden urgency?" Michael expanded his investigation beyond documents. He befriended the landscapers who worked throughout the community, learning that they'd been instructed to document and report specific violations at designated homes. He chatted with postal carriers about neighborhood changes. He bought coffee for county clerks who handled property records. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle. 16-year-old Tommy Jenkins, who mowed lawns in the neighborhood, hesitantly admitted that Richard Kowalski had paid him $50 to photograph the inside of my garage when I left it open. "They wanted to see if you had like violations or whatever," Tommy explained nervously, "but I think they were looking for something specific." Our breakthrough came from Sarah Chun, recently fired from her position as assistant city planner over coffee at a diner 20 from our neighborhood. She revealed that a massive rezoning proposal had been quietly submitted to the county. The proposal only works if they control certain key properties, forming a continuous parcel. She explained, showing us a map on her tablet. "Your home sits right in the middle of what they need." Sarah's hands trembled as she manipulated the map. "Two security guards escorted me out the same hour." I questioned why this proposal skipped environmental review. She withdrew a flash drive from her necklace pendant, voice dropping. "I had 3 minutes to clear my desk, enough time to grab this." The screen filled with emails marked confidential as she narrated rapid fire. "Commissioner Phillips, Victoria's cousin, ordered planning staff To minimize regulatory hurdles, his campaign treasurer is Lawrence Blackwell's brother. The zoning board chair's daughter just received a mysterious academic scholarship. 7 officials involved in approval have received consulting fees from shell companies. She pointed to a timestamp. They're voting next Tuesday. After that, nothing can stop them. One email particularly stood out. Lawrence Blackwell had written to Commissioner Phillips, the Mercer property remains problematic. Conventional acquisition strategies have failed. Moving to alternative methods as discussed. The email was dated 1 week before my first violation notice arrived. They've been targeting specific homeowners, Sarah continued. Cross-referencing property records with HOA enforcement actions shows a clear pattern. Every home that's received major violations sits on what they're calling the primary extraction corridor. Michael studied the map intently. This isn't random harassment, Dad. This is methodical. They're using the HOA as a weapon to clear a specific path through the neighborhood. The earth-shattering revelation came from Marie's grandson, whose trembling hands passed us classified geological surveys he discovered during his State Water Authority internship. Look at these readings, he whispered, pointing to neon-bright anomalies beneath our homes. Not gas, rare earth elements, the military kind. Pentagon analysts would kill for this data. His voice dropped further. This isn't just the largest deposit outside China, it's potentially worth billions. That oak tree of yours, it's sitting on what might be the most strategically valuable 10 yards of American soil in the continental United States. The puzzle pieces aligned perfectly. Meridian Development wasn't just a real estate company, it was a front for a mining operation. The HOA takeover wasn't about property values or community standards, it was about forcing out homeowners who occupied strategic locations for mineral extraction. They can't legally force you to sell, Michael explained, but they can make your life so miserable that selling becomes your only option. That night we discovered our water had been shut off. The HOA claimed it was due to emergency pipe repairs that might take several days to resolve. Michael smiled grimly. They're getting desperate. Time to go on the offensive. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. Typically these meetings drew 15 residents at most. This time when Michael and I arrived, the parking lot was full inside. Over 70 homeowners filled every chair with more standing along the walls. Victoria Blackwell seemed momentarily taken back by the attendance, but quickly regained her composure. Let's begin with the treasurer's report, she announced, attempting to control the agenda. Point of order. Michael stood, all eyes turned to him. According to HOA bylaws section 2 paragraph 4, any resident may request agenda modifications before proceedings begin. Victoria's professional smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. And you're Michael Mercer, representing my father James Mercer's property interests. You're not a homeowner, she dismissed. Only property owners may participate in proceedings. I have notarized proxy A. Authority, Michael replied calmly, holding up a document, and I moved to add discussion of recent enforcement actions and the Meridian Development rezoning proposal to today's agenda. A murmur rippled through the room. Many residents were hearing about the rezoning for the first time. That motion is out of order, Victoria declared. The rezoning proposal is not HOA business. Actually, came a voice from the back. Any action affecting property values is explicitly within HOA jurisdiction. According to our charter, it was Harold Williams, a retired attorney who rarely attended meetings. I second the motion to modify the agenda. Realizing she was cornered, Victoria called for a vote. The agenda modification passed 65-4. When his turn came, Michael didn't attack. He simply presented facts methodically using a projector he'd set up beforehand. He displayed property records showing the pattern of strategic acquisitions. He revealed the geological surveys indicating rare earth mineral deposits. He presented the connections between Victoria's husband's company and several foreign mining interests. These enforcement actions aren't about community standards, Michael concluded. They're about forcing specific homeowners to sell so that mining access points can be established. The room erupted. Longtime residents realized they'd been manipulated. Homeowners discovered their property values would plummet once mining began. Victoria attempted to regain control, but the damage was done. The room buzzed with angry conversations as neighbors realized they'd been systematically deceived. We bought into a community, not a mining operation. They've been planning this for years while smiling on our faces. What about our children's health? The water supply. Victoria banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. I'll have to order, or I'll adjourn this meeting immediately. Then came the unexpected turning point. Richard Kowalski, who had been sitting silently at the board table, slowly rose to his feet. The room quieted as the intimidating security director cleared his throat. "I was hired to do a job," he announced gruffly, "but I didn't sign up for this." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, placing it deliberately on the table. The small device seemed to carry immense weight as all eyes fixed upon it. 23 years on the police force, and I've never been involved in anything like this. He continued, his voice carrying through the silent room. "Everything's on there: the target lists, the violation quotas, the pressure strategies. They had me documenting private conversations, photographing the inside of homes, even collecting mail to build doses on residents they wanted to push out." His face showed genuine remorse as he surveyed the room. "I took this job after my pension got cut, needed the health insurance for my wife's treatments, but there are lines you don't cross." He turned directly to Victoria, whose face had gone pale. "They promised me nobody would get hurt, that it was just business, but forcing elderly people from their homes where they raised their kids and plan to live out their days, that's not business." "That's wrong." He tapped the USB drive. "I've got a copy with my attorney too, with instructions to release everything if anything happens to me or my family." He turned to face the room. "Look, I'm not proud of my role here, but you should know they have plans for most of your homes eventually. The first phase targets 23 properties, including Mr. Mercer's, but the 5-year plan is to clear most of the neighborhood." Victoria's face was drained of color. "This meeting is adjourned immediately." "No," came a chorus of voices. For the first time, the community was united against a common threat. Marie Delaney, the 79-year-old widow who'd warned me weeks ago, took the floor. "I motion for an emergency recall election of the entire board, as provided in Section 7 of our charter." The vote was overwhelming, 68-4 in favor. As we left the meeting, Michael put his arm around my shoulders. "It's not over yet, Dad. People like this have contingency plans." The next morning, a black Lexus parked in front of my house. A distinguished man in an expensive suit emerged, carrying a leather portfolio. "James Mercer?" he inquired when I opened the door. "I'm Lawrence Blackwell, CEO of Meridian Development. May I come in?" Michael appeared silently behind me. "Whatever you have to say can be said right here." Blackwell's eyes flickered with recognition. "You must be the son, former military. I understand. Impressive performance last night. What do you want?" I asked, "to make this situation beneficial for everyone." Blackwell smiled. "Meridian is prepared to offer you $1.2 million for your property, nearly 5 times its market value. You'd be free to relocate anywhere with no financial concerns. A generous retirement package, if you will." The amount was staggering enough to solve all my financial worries and leave a substantial inheritance for Michael. "And if I refuse?" I asked. Blackwell's smile remained fixed while his eyes turned to winter. "The recall election," he chuckled softly, "a temporary setback." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ask your neighbors about the strange water outages hitting homes of HOA. Critics ask why 3 county commissioners suddenly reversed their positions after their children received merit scholarships. Ask why the last homeowner who refused our offer found himself facing an IRS audit, building code violations, and mysterious damage to his foundation." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it dismissively. "Your son is impressive, but Delta Force eventually redeploys, doesn't it? You'll be alone again. This offer, $1.22 million, expires in 48 hours. After that," he shrugged with practiced casualness while his eyes promised consequences. After he left, Michael and I sat in silence. "That's life-changing money, Dad," Michael finally said. "It is." I agreed. "But this house holds your mother's memory, and if what they're planning hurts the community." Michael nodded, understanding. Then his phone rang, an unknown number. His expression changed as he listened, asking occasional clarifying questions before hanging up. "That was Sarah Chun, the fired city planner," he explained. "She's been doing her own investigation. The rare earth mineral deposit is real, but there's something much bigger happening." The revelation that changed everything arrived at 2 a.m. with 3 sharp knocks on our back door. A Pentagon contact of Michael, still in his dress uniform, laid down satellite photos alongside geological surveys. "Your HOA problem just became a matter of national security," he said grimly. The evidence was undeniable. Meridian Development wasn't merely partnered with foreign interests, it was a sophisticated front for Chinese military intelligence operating through 7 layers of American-looking shell companies. The memory stick contained intercepted communications between Beijing officials discussing the Whispering Pines strategic resource acquisition. Michael's face hardened as he translated the military significance. "These aren't just valuable minerals, they're the exact elements that give our next-generation missile defense systems their edge. If They control this deposit, they control our defense supply chain. Even more disturbing was what Sarah had found in communications between Meridian and county officials, language suggesting that environmental regulations would be streamlined. Once mining began, the extraction process for these minerals would involve chemicals that could potentially contaminate the regional water table serving 3 counties. This isn't just about our neighborhood anymore. Michael said gravely, it's about who controls resources vital to national security and the health of everyone in the valley. But the final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Richard Kowalski arrived at our door that evening looking haggard and nervous. "They fired me this morning," he said, when we invited him in. "But there's something you should know." He handed Michael a folder containing aerial surveys of the entire region. "These weren't in the files I gave you yesterday, because I just found them on Victoria's computer while clearing out my office." The surveys revealed that the mineral deposits extended far beyond our neighborhood under protected wetlands that were home to endangered species. Meridian's strategy was to establish mining operations in our community first, then use that foothold to justify minimal additional expansion into protected areas. "They're using your neighborhood as the camel's nose under the tent," Kolsky explained. "Once they start operations here, they'll argue that the environmental damage is already done, so they might as well expand." Michael made 3 calls that night. The first was to his former commanding officer, now working with the Defense Intelligence Agency. The second was to a contact at the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which reviews foreign acquisitions with national security implications. The third was to a journalist specializing in environmental and corporate investigations. Within 72 hours, federal agents arrived not at my house, but at Meridian Development's headquarters, and Victoria Blackwell's home search warrants revealed evidence of conspiracy, fraud, foreign influence operations, and environmental crimes. Lawrence Blackwell's generous offer was exposed as part of a scheme to quietly acquire properties without triggering national security reviews that would have revealed the foreign ownership. Victoria faced charges for using her position to facilitate the plan and for receiving substantial payments through offshore accounts. The community held an emergency meeting where federal officials explained the situation. The rare earth mineral deposits would still eventually be developed, but as a carefully regulated strategic national resource with full environmental protections, transparent processes, and fair compensation for affected homeowners. Those who wished to sell would receive genuine market value plus relocation assistance. Those who wished to stay could do so with guarantees that any mining operations would not begin for at least 5 years, allowing for thoughtful transition planning. The HOA itself was reformed from the ground up. A new board was elected with term limits, transparency requirements, and clear limitations on enforcement powers. Monthly dues were reduced to cover only essential services. Marie Delaney, now heading the Community Transition Committee, stopped by with a gift, a young oak sapling for wherever you decide to plant new roots, she said with a smile. Richard Kowalski found redemption as security consultant for the Homeowners Group, negotiating with legitimate mining companies, ensuring community interests were protected. As for Victoria Blackwell, her political ambitions evaporated as quickly as her legal troubles mounted. Her husband faced not only civil penalties, but criminal charges related to foreign influence operations. This week marks 1 year since those HOA officers pounded on my door with their violation notices and threats. My oak tree is thriving and Eleanor's roses are blooming again. Michael decided to retire from active duty and has bought a fixer-upper just 3 streets over. He says he's found a new mission in civilian life, protecting communities instead of just borders. Last month, we gathered for a neighborhood potluck under the old maple tree in the common area. Marie brought her famous apple pie. The Patels shared homemade samosas. Even Richard Kowalski came, no longer wearing his HOA jacket, but a casual shirt that made him look 10 years younger. Looking across our rejuvenated neighborhood, neighbors sharing coffee on porches where they once hid behind locked doors. I understand what we truly saved, not just houses, but something America's forgotten, real community. Eleanor's oak stands taller now. Beneath it rests a small bronze plaque the neighbors installed when I wasn't looking. It reads, "Courage doesn't retire." Below that, in smaller letters, the Mercer stand 2024. Those HOA bullies came expecting to intimidate an old veteran. They never realized some men don't stop being warriors just because they hang up their uniforms, and we never stop defending what matters when intimidation comes pounding. Let it meet strength at the door.